Excalibur is one of the warframes that was buffed back in March when the Techrod Encore update was released. At the time, every content creator was talking about how powerful Excalibur had become, and yet, I haven't seen many Excalibur players since. I think they're missing out. He is extremely powerful with the right setup. Today I will show you a build that you can take all the way up to level cap. But before we take a look at the mods, let me give you a very brief overview of his abilities. Excalibur passive ability allows him to deal bonus damage and have increased attack speed with swords. Umbra also has sentience, but I'm not going to talk about it because it's not relevant to the build. His first ability, Slash Dash, Excalibur dashes forward while becoming invulnerable during the slash. This is important because this is your built-in rolling guard. Very useful in tight situations. The damage is affected by mods and arcanes installed on the Exalted Blade. Second ability, Radial Blind. Excalibur howls and releases an intense flash of light that stuns enemies and opens them up to finishers. Good for crowd control, but not that useful in my opinion. This is the ability that always gets replaced in most Excalibur builds. Third ability, Radial Javelin. Excalibur drives his Exalted Blade into the ground, launching javelins into enemies. On its own, this is kinda weak, but there's a fantastic augment for this ability called Furious Javelin that provides a multiplicative damage boost per enemy hit. Now, the bread and butter of the build, Exalted Blade. Excalibur summons a sword of pure light that shoots energy waves, punches through walls, and deals a lot of damage. Now that we know the basics of his kit, let's get right into the build. We begin by getting rid of Radial Howl, replacing it with Wrathful Advance to greatly increase our critical chance. To get the most out of this ability, we are aiming for 269 ability strength. This adds up with the 31% critical chance we're getting from Galvanized Steel on our Exalted Blade, resulting in a final 300% critical chance, enough for guaranteed red crits. These 4 mods are required to reach our strength goal: Umbral Intensify, Augur Secrets, Blind Rage, and Warrior's Rest. This augment is mandatory if you're modding Excalibur Umbra because it fixes a glitch related to his passive ability where we lose combo count and buffs when switching to our operator. Augur Secrets is optional if you're not relying on shields for survivability, but I would highly suggest some form of shield-based defensive setup because other survivability methods require more investment on Excalibur. So if you're comfortable with this method, then Brief Respite, Fast Deflection, and Arcane Aegis to complete our setup. However, I understand that some players dislike this mechanic. If that's you, then I would swap Aegis for Arcane Blessing or Persistence, Augur Secrets for Umbral Fiber, and adding Healing Return to the Exalted Blade. And remember that you still need to add more health to the build. High Duration is necessary, so we install Narrow-Minded for more ability duration and to slow the energy drain of Exalted Blade. Prime Flow or Archon Flow to reach the activation threshold of the melee critical damage shards. I recommend 3 critical damage shards, 1 Equilibrium shard, and 1 yellow casting speed shard. Finally, to keep our energy tank full, Arcane Energize, or Arcane Universal Fallout if you're modding your Exalted Blade for radiation, and Synth Deconstruct on our companion to take advantage of the melee equilibrium shard. Chromatic Blade will add a lot of status chance to our Exalted Blade, and it will change our damage to an elemental damage that's determined by our primary emissive color. I suggest blue or purple colors for an electricity/melee influence build, but you can choose green for toxin/corrosive damage if you're running Argon Continuity, red for heat damage if you want to use something like Arcane Hotshot/Archon Vitality. For this build, we are going for electricity. Like I mentioned before, Furious Javelin is actually a multiplicative damage boost, so I consider this augment an essential mod on our setup. And I know you're already wondering, how can we hit multiple enemies with our javelins if our ability range is so low? Pretty simple actually. We rely on this wonderful little arcane called Magus Anomaly. We can activate this on demand for easy grouping. Nautilus is a decent alternative, but I consider the arcane to be the better option. Finally, let's take a look at the Exalted Blade. We begin by adding Galvanized Steel for more critical chance and damage. To take full advantage of our high critical chance thanks to Wrathful Advance, we're adding Amalgam Organ Shatter, Gladiator Might, and Dreamer's Wrath to boost our critical damage. We're going to add more elemental damage by adding Galvanized Elementalist and Shocking Touch, Melee Influence for nuking, Weeping Wounds to increase our status chance even further, and Condition Overload to take full advantage of our high status chance. I chose electricity damage so I can fit in more critical damage mods, but you can experiment with other elements. Gas paired with melee influence is an amazing alternative, for example. Finally, we add Quickening or Prime Fury to increase our overall DPS. Every melee build needs a primer. My favorite is the Epitaph Prime because it has a big area of effect. The setup is fairly simple. Prime Fulmination to increase the area of effect, Lethal Torrent for more multi-shot and fire rate, and as many status chance mobs as you can fit, alongside your preferred elemental combination. Secondary Encumber for even more status effects, or Secondary Fortify for another layer of survivability. Augur Seeker is here to support our shield gating setup, and extra status duration is always nice to have on a primer. It doesn't really matter that much because your enemies won't live that long anyway, so if you're not shield gating, then you can just swap this for something else. Manual priming is very effective, but sometimes, if I'm feeling lazy, I like to outsource my priming. Dorma Hounds can prime entire rooms thanks to the Repo Audit and Manifold Bomb combo. You can also toss in Synergized Perspectives in order to add an extra element to the mix. Guardian is nice to have as a safety net. Rest of the setup is up to personal preference. When modding the companion's weapon, the setup is fairly similar to the Epitaph. Add as many status chance mobs as you can fit, plus your preferred elemental combo. You'll notice Enduring Affliction, this is optional. I like it because we are levitating enemies with an ability from the Naramon focus tree, which is called Void Levitation. I'll explain more about this in a second. Our focus tool of choice is Naramon, which has good synergies with melee warframes. Void Levitation, for example, can proc the lifted status effect and leaves our enemies suspended in the air for a few seconds. This means that we can get even more damage from Condition Overload thanks to the extra status effect. We can take this even further with Lethal Levitation. By attacking these floating targets with our operator, we benefit from a flat damage increase to our Exalted Blade. Another useful ability is Opening Slam. Every time we perform a slam attack as our operator, our combo counter builds twice as fast. Very useful for getting to max combo quickly on demand. So, that's the build. Let me give you a quick summary on how to use it. The gameplay loop of the build is simple, but I find it engaging and fun. We begin by casting Wrathful Advance and keeping it active all the time. Then we swap to our operator and perform a slam attack. Our combo counter will now build twice as fast. After that, we prime the enemies using the Epitaph before hitting them with our Exalted Blade. If we want to deal more damage, then before priming, we cast Void Levitation so our enemies are affected by an extra status effect. I say before priming because the Epitaph has a Force Cold proc on impact. Enough of these can freeze an enemy, and frozen enemies are not affected by Lifted. When you encounter a big group of enemies, swap to your operator, get to the center of the group, and then swap back to your Warframe. You can now cast Radial Javelin for a massive damage boost. Finally, if things get a little hairy, you can cast Slash Dash to become invulnerable for a little while. This is your panic button. This concludes our Excalibur guide. Thank you so much for watching my first Warframe video. I apologize if I am mispronouncing some words. English is not my first language. If you have any questions about the build, drop them in the comments below. I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.